Okay. Let's go around our Zoom room and at least introduce ourselves and tell us where you're zooming in from. Rabbi Ferret, will you start us?
I'm zooming from just outside of the sanctuary in my office at TBZ, but at some point I will switch to my phone and I'll drive home and listen.
Okay, great. And I'm going to suggest also, as we're introducing ourselves, let's think about saying, let's see, something about Purim. Your favorite Purim costume that you've ever dressed up in. How about that?
Oh, my favorite Purim costume was when I dressed up for Queen Esther. I think it was my very first Purim. And it was just such a glitzy, ornate costume. And I was so sorry I won the Purim contest that year.
Yay. To be proud of. Good. All right. Sue, do you want to go next?
Sure. Sue Khan, I'm calling in from Brookline. And I don't know my favorite one, but one that I remember because so when Rob Claudia was pregnant with, I think Ariel, it must have been Ariel, Jonathan and I think we're co-presidents, and we both dressed as pregnant Rob Claudias. Right. And I thought of it because I was wearing the shirt the other day that got stretched out, and it's still stretched out.
Wonderful, wonderful. And is it Rebecca?
Yeah. So I'm just up the hill from Rav Tiferet. And in Brookline, right? I live sort of on Summit Hill. And my favorite Purim costume. Well, one year, daughter Sarah and I wore a team costume where I wore her on my back. She was like 4, but it was a thing where she'd worn when she was a baby. We dressed in black and we were a spider together.
Oh, wow. Oh, wonderful. All those arms. Oh,
yeah.
Very creative.
That was really fun.
Yeah, good. So Diane, welcome back. We're introducing ourselves and saying where we're zooming in from and a favorite Purim costume. So I'm going to let you get your thoughts together. And Barry, would you like to go next?
I'm beaming in from Jamaica Plain. I'm Barry Keller, and unfortunately, I don't think I've ever dressed up for Purim, but I'm always a spectator, an appreciative spectator.
Good. Okay. All right. And Beth?
Hi, I'm coming in from Newton. I apologize for being late. I was making dinner and I may have to cut out early to serve it, but I am getting a reprieve right now. So it's nice. I feel like I haven't seen some of you in a really long time. So it's nice to see you.
Good. And by the way, Beth, you're not late. You were on time for the later time. This went out in 2 different announcements. So you got here long before the beginning of the second. So you're well on time. Good. All right. And Claudia?
Hi, I'm Claudia. I'm here from Cambridge. And I'm really drawing a blank on favorite Purim costume, but I have to say, like, one year as an adult for Halloween, I dressed up as Little Orphan Annie, which was sort of like an inside joke because I put a red curly wig over my red hair. So that was one costume experience that I remember.
Great, wonderful. Right, red over red, right? So yeah. And Rav Tiferet, Mike Krieger is having trouble getting in. Would you be willing to? And actually, if you can,
I'll resend him the link again.
Yeah, and send another blast just in case there are other people who saved the old link. And
is there another meeting happening on that link?
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's the one in the happenings that went out 4 days ago, unfortunately.
Yeah. Is there a way that the people who are there, can we reach whoever's the Zoom host so they can message people who are in the waiting room where to go?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good. Okay. Diane, do you want to go next?
Sure. Diane Balser, JP. I never get into costumes for, I think when I was, the long story, when I was about 12, I wore some kind of dancing Queen Esther costume, and that's the last one I remember.
Wonderful, wonderful.
But I did like a few years ago when like everybody was wearing, from young women to older women, Ruth Bader Ginsburg outfits.
Wonderful. RBG.
Yes, yes.
Great, great, great. So, and I'm Judy Kummer, and I'm here from Roslindale. Rozzy. And my favorite costume, or the most recent, which makes it easiest to remember, was the last one that I got into at TBZ from 2 years ago, right before the lockdown, when I dressed up as a life-size bottle of Purell. Just a great visual gag, you know. And then, of course, it turned out to be something that we've needed, all of us, for a long time since, you know, all this time. So, welcome. Nice to have you all here. And I know that Mike Krieger is going to hopefully come on in, and then we'll see if anybody else joins us. I wanted to have us look together, talk together briefly before we even get into our text about some of the observances for Purim. So when you stop and think about Purim, what are some of the things that you think about? What are the associations? What do we do for Purim? And if you'll unmute yourselves and just let's pop
Make
in.
Hamantashen, which is another one of
Hamantashen.
my.
Okay, Hamantashen. Okay, next one.
Mishteh, we have a feast.
Mishteh, we have a feast. Good.
Shloch manot.
Shloach manot. We send baskets of goodies to friends. We read the
Right.
Megillah.
And
Drinking?
Mike, welcome. Drinking. Right?
And
Drinking in the name of. So, Mike, we're answering the question. What are some of the traditions? What do we do for Purim? What do you remember? So we've got reading the Megillah. We've got Mishloach Manot, sending goodie baskets to friends. We've got eating Hamantashen. What are some of the others? Drinking so that, to the point where, anybody know this? There's a famous Purim parade in Jerusalem that they have with a special name.
Adloyadea, right.
The Adloyada. Good for you, Claudia. Good. The Adloyada, which means?
You don't know the difference between good and evil.
There we go.
Right.
To the drink to the point where, or get so confused or merry that you don't know the difference between the good guy and the bad guy. Okay. Good.
Not no love your name. I just realized I don't have a kippah. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay. So, and Matanot Yonim is another very important piece, which is gifts to the poor. We do not in the middle of our festivities ignore those who may not be able to celebrate as readily, as easily. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to be of support to those who may be a little less fortunate. Good. So, and there are specifically of those, there are 4 of those things are specifically mitzvot of Purim. Anybody know which ones they are? Rebecca, your last one was, okay. So
Not no love your name. Mishloch manot. Mishteh and Megillah, right?
Yes, Mishteh and Megillah. Mishteh is the Purim Seudah, the feast, a festive feast. Good. Okay. And the reading of the Megillah. So clearly when we read the Megillah, we're drowning out Haman's name. There are different ways of reading the Megillah. And one in particular, this particular version of this way of our looking at the Megillah tonight, we'll have a chance to look together at a few different models for feminine behavior and feminine leadership. Okay, so this particular text that I'm going to put up on the screen in a moment was written by an Orthodox feminist, a woman who is a Rabbi, which is a modern Orthodox female rabbi. At one point towards the end of the text, she's going to say, as Orthodox feminists, as if we're all Orthodox feminists. So we'll read the text and we'll know that we may vary a little bit from that, but it's fascinating anyway that she is very clearly looking at the text through her own eyes. And as an Orthodox woman, she is looking with feminist eyes at the text. Okay, so let me see if I can actually do this properly. Okay. And I need to share my screen. Where did it go? Hold on for just a second. Let me just see if I can figure out where I. Okay, can you all see this where it says Vashti and Esther, a feminist perspective? If you can see it, will you give me a thumbs up? Good, okay, all right. This text actually has space at the top for what did not appear on the screen, which is a picture of Esther lolling on the bed with a servant girl at her feet. There are lots and lots of depictions in fancy art about fancy art, you know, fine art. They've used the Esther image, lots of images from the story of the book of Esther as wonderful opportunities for fine art. You can find lots on the web or in lovely art books. So we're going to have a chance to look together at this and see, sorry, you don't need to be seeing my Google Calendar. Hang on. Fine. I'm so sorry. Hang on for just a second. Technical difficulties.
We've all been there, haven't we? Sharing our calendars.
Bless you. Thank you. That's kind. Okay, are we back?
Yep.
Great. Nope. Did my email just come up? I don't know what's
No.
appearing.
No, we've got your document, your Vashti and Esther document.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can I? All right. All right. So we've got this this fact of the relationship between these two Persian queens being integral to understanding the Purim story. A relationship between the two, right? So do Vashti and Esther ever meet? No, they do not in our story. Okay. So let me actually see if I can get a chance to see everybody's faces on my screen.
So Judy, where does Vashti come from initially?
Does anybody else know this? So she's in this Persian area as the queen. I don't know if I can answer any better than, does that answer your question?
I was just curious how he met her, because it's the meeting with Esther is very defined.
Right, right. So we don't have a backstory. She
Yeah.
appears in our story as if she's always been there, as does Achashverosh, as does Haman. Right, so there's no origin story in that text, which is a very interesting point, actually. We're going to be looking for gaps in the text where we might actually be able to add our own voices. Okay, so thank you for serving as sort of a plant in the crowd, Diane. It's wonderful.
Anytime.
Yay. All right. So what I'd like to do actually is just take turns reading paragraph at a time. If I call on you and you don't want to read, just wave your hand and I'll call on the next person. So, so Diane, would you like to start us with the first paragraph here?
Sure. Although Vashti and Esther never meet, the relationship between them is integral to understanding the events of the book of Esther. Vashti disappears by the end of the first chapter, but she casts a long shadow over the rest of the book.
Okay.
As we encounter, should I stop?
That was a very slim little paragraph, so yes, please go ahead.
Okay. As we encounter Vashti in chapter 1, we learn the following about her. She's beautiful and headstrong. She throws a good party. She refuses to have her appearances before the king regulated solely by his desires. For this last offense, Vashti pays dearly, losing her crown and incurring perpetual banishment from the king's presence. At the close of chapter 1, it is clear that a woman in Achashverosh's court would do well to be dutiful and to come before the king as he commands. The essentiality of female obedience is further confirmed by the final verse of the chapter, in which a missive is sent to all of Achashverosh's subjects, reminding them in no uncertain terms that every man must rule in his household.
Okay, so what an amazing, powerful phrase there, the essentiality of female obedience, right? That's really central to all of this, okay? And are we going to find that that's going to remain even at the end of our story? We'll see how that all unfolds. Okay, so, but we have this fact that there is Vashti. She's an uppity female. What happens to her? Thank goodness it's not off with her head, but she loses her crown. All right, she gets banished. And they use this as an object lesson, as a teaching moment to say, she is the ultimate that you don't want to have your woman behave like. We want to have women behave just neatly, quietly. You know, they should be subservient. They should do whatever it is that you, the man, clearly talking to the men, you, the man, want. Every man must rule in his house.
Ugh.
He needs to be the king. Okay. All right. And let's see. So Rebecca, would you like to read for us by contrast?
By contrast, Esther is presented at first as the perfect foil to Vashti. Whereas Vashti was willful and independent, Esther is passive and submissive. The reflexive use of the Hebrew word lakach, is constantly applied to her. She is lakach, taken in by Mordecai as a foster daughter, taken to the king's harem, and taken before the king. She does not reveal her identity at the palace, for Mordecai had commanded her not to tell, end quote. She requests nothing at the harem, only accepting what Haggai, the king's eunuch, chooses to give her. Even after she is crowned queen, we are told Esther continues to obey the commands of Mordecai as she had done under his care. It is no surprise that Achashverosh loves Esther. She is the model of docility, an exact antidote to Vashti.
Okay, so we've got clearly a separate, very, very different model, really an opposing model. We've got the uppity female, then we've got the super docile, right? She's very, very docile. She's very passive. This is the ultimate image of passivity. There's all the lakach here. She is taken. It's a whole, the language is passive. That's the passive form in the language that's used. She is brought wherever it is that she needs to be. So does she exert her own will? Not at all. We don't even know if she knows that she has a will of her own. Okay, so Barry, would you like to read the next paragraph for us?
Esther understands very well her role as Ahasuerus' queen. When Mordecai commands her to appear before the king and intercede on behalf of the Jews, Esther responds that everyone knows that those who appear before the king unbidden are condemned to die. She has learned from her predecessor's fate that the queen's job is to come when she is called. Mordecai insists to Esther that it is her responsibility to plead for her nation.
All right, so up until now, Mordecai has really adored her because she was so passive. And now we've got the tables being turned. There is this very interesting shifting point right at this place in our story where Mordecai goes to her and says, you have to go and reveal your identity to the king. He may not have known who you were and that you were Jewish up until now, but you are his beloved, you're his favorite. And it may very well be that it is for this reason that you now are here in this exalted position so that you can plead for your people. Now, clearly, this is a docile person. This is a person who's been celebrated for how very docile she is. And we don't even have any idea about how she felt about being chosen as the queen, right? We don't have any idea about anything about her, but all of a sudden we have Mordecai coming to her and saying, you need to become an active person and leave your docility behind, right? You need to shift gears completely. Okay, so Beth, would you like to read for us? Did somebody want to say something? No, okay, please pipe up if there are thoughts that come. Beth?
Judith, in the story, isn't there some kind of beauty contest that she gets picked at?
Do we even know how she felt about being in the beauty contest?
Well, her cousin, Mordecai, asked her to do it. We don't know. I don't know that we know more than that, right?
Right. We know what Mordecai thought.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about Esther's perspective? Not from the story. And we're going to have some rabbinic midrashim after, if we have that. I hope we'll have the time to go through some rabbinic midrashim and see. Yes, so we'll see what happens with some elaboration. Okay. Good point. So Beth, do you feel like reading?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, this is a
yes.
Okay. This is a moment of crisis for Esther. She's caught between conflicting obediences to her foster father and husband. In addition, to come before the king unsummoned is an abnegation of her role as Vashti's replacement. She was chosen to be queen since she represented the antithesis of Vashti's persona. Esther's position, her identity, and quite possibly her life are all closely tied to her obedience to the king.
Okay, so she is this image of docility, and she was chosen for that. And all of a sudden, she's supposed to step out of that role and switch gears. This doesn't sound like it computes. It even makes any sense at all. Right? Okay, so Sue, would you like to read the next paragraph?
Sure. In this moment of fate, Esther looks into her mirror and discovers that she does not look quite so different from Vashti after all. She takes matters into her own hands and stands up to both sources of authority. Esther assumes control of Mordecai's plan, changing and amending as she sees fit. Like Vashti, she will appear before the king only when she decides that the time is right. In this case, after 3 days of fasting. Instead of following Mordecai's suggestion and simply making her petition, she will throw a series of parties, as Vashti did. In order to succeed, Esther realizes that she must take on aspects of the repudiated former queen.
Right. So I was just fascinated when I came across this is a slightly different way of looking at the Megillah. We've got these two models, and we've got, in a way, Esther realizing that she actually has to take a page out of Vashti's book here. This is not just accept the way she's always been and then just shift gears. Wait a minute. Maybe it's that she actually has to take on aspects of the repudiated former queen behavior, right? So it's just a little different. But she's going to do things in her own way. She doesn't do things as Mordecai wants, right? What does he want her to do?
Go straight away.
Straight away, go straight to the king. She's not going to do that. What does she do instead?
She fasts and then she throws parties.
There we go. So she fasts for 3 days. She has her handmaids, I think, also fast with her. And then she goes to the king. She doesn't even ask him right away. She invites him to a party. She invites him to another party. And it's only at that.
All the Jews, doesn't she have all the Jews fast with her too?
All the Jews are fasting as well. Yeah, I think she asked Mordecai to have all the Jews fasting with her. Yeah. All right. So we've got a shift here. And let's see. Claudia, would you like to read for us?
Sure. Of course, we do not actually know why Vashti refused to appear before the king. It could have been out of modesty, as the Midrash in Esther Rabbah suggests, or as the Babylonian Talmud describes, she may simply have been unhappy with her appearance that day, a sudden case of leprosy, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, or the surprise sprouting of a tail, according to a Baraita. Perhaps she was being capricious. Perhaps she was a proto-feminist fighting for a sense of independent integrity. In any event, Vashti's disobedience brings her career to an abrupt end, and her fate is quite deliberately meant to serve as an object lesson to women everywhere.
Okay, so we have, by the way, this image of modesty is, it comes to us from a midrash that says that she was asked to come and appear before the men to dance before the court wearing her royal diadem, her royal crown, and according to the midrash, and nothing else. Right? So wearing the crown and dance before them, not wearing anything else. So maybe it was out of modesty. They give her that credit. And I love this image that maybe she sprouted a tail. Who knows? You know, maybe she had a sudden case of leprosy. This speaks to the rabbi's wonderful imaginations. But in any case, yes, her career comes to an abrupt end, and we're supposed to then take note. We women are supposed to take note that no, we're not supposed to behave like that. That's an object lesson for us not to do. All right. So Mike, would you like to read?
Yeah. As Esther marshals her strength to save her nation, she must revisit the experiences of her shunned predecessor and learn from them. Esther is more calculated, more subtle, more divinely inspired, and ultimately far more successful than Vashti. Yet in order to triumph, Esther must confront the image of Vashti and incorporate, or perhaps discover, the attributes of Vashti in herself.
So it's an interesting thought that maybe each of us has some aspects of both Vashti and Esther and melded inside us, right? So Rav Tiferet, would you like to read us the last paragraph here?
Sure. As Orthodox feminists, We are constantly confronted with taboo images of dangerous women from whom we are told to distance ourselves. A is too radical. B has gone too far. C has made many enemies. We struggle to draw our borders, to be open and yet traditional, free and yet constrained within halakha. Purim is a holiday in which we explore and challenge our boundaries. We dress up as other people. Some of us drink to the point where differences become blurred. In the spirit of this holiday and following the legacy of our ancestor Esther, I encourage us to re-examine whom we emulate and from whom we shy away. We may discover, as Esther did, that we are not so different from those whom we fear, and that the most important lessons can be learned from the unlikeliest of teachers.
From the unlikeliest of teachers. Thank you very much. So we should really be examining whom we emulate and from whom we shy away. And look at the possible melding. Can we take a page out of here and a page out of there? And do this consciously. All right, so what I wanted to do is take a look at some of the primary material, some of the midrashim from the rabbinic era, primary rabbinic sources. I'm bringing you just the English. Forgive me. I had a wrestling moment with the Sefaria website. I've not quite learned how to vanquish it. It vanquished me, but here we go. At least we'll have a chance to look together at these. So these are the first two are both from the BT here at the bottom of this page, at the bottom of number 2, BT Megillah. BT stands for, anybody know? The Babylonian Talmud. Okay, page 12b. So, and that's Babylonian Talmud, then the tractate Megillah. So number 1, Diane, do you feel like reading again?
Sure.
And by the way, the dark text, the bolded text, is the text that's actually in this midrash, and the fainter text has been filled in a little bit in the blanks. Okay.
So the Gemara details what occurred at the feast. So too, at the feast of that wicked man, Achashverosh, when the men began to converse, some said, the Median women are the most beautiful, while others said, the Persian women are the most beautiful. Achashverosh said to them, the vessel that I use, i.e. my wife, is neither Median nor Persian, but rather Chaldean. Do you wish to see her? They said to him, yes, provided that she be naked, for we wish to see her without any additional adornments.
So here's our midrash that spells out that, oh, they wanted to see her dancing. This is Vashti dancing naked. And so who was it who asked? Diane, was it you who asked where Vashti came from?
Yes, yeah.
So she seems to be of Chaldean descent. And by the way, we may pronounce that as Median, but that's from Medea. So here it's pronounced Median. Median and Persian, okay. Right? Yes, so Medea is this land, this particular land. Okay. All right. So let's see. Rebecca, would you like to read number 2?
Sure. The verse states, but Queen Vashti refused to come. The Gemara asks, since she was immodest, as the master said above, the two of them, Vashti and Achashverosh, had sinful intentions. What is the reason that she did not come? Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina said, this teaches that she broke out in leprosy, and therefore she was embarrassed to expose herself publicly. An alternative reason for embarrassment was taught in a Baraita. The angel Gabriel came and fashioned her a tail.
All right, so here we've got our leprosy and our tail. These are the primary sources. By the way, so I wanted to let you know that these texts are compiled. They're a tiny number of the texts that are listed in a really wonderful article. I need to give thanks to and credit to a wonderful article by Tamar Meir on the Jewish Women's Archive site, the JWA. When we're reading these texts, one of the things that I'm hoping that we'll look at is not just the texts themselves, but the perspective. We talk about hermeneutics, about looking at the lens through which something is seen. So if we can tell whose lens are we looking at, we're looking through here in order to see these things. And this will become clearer as we go. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Where am I going with this? We'll get there, okay? So whose eyes, whose perspective are we looking through, and whose perspective is missing from these tales, right? So these rabbis are sitting around having discussions. Some of them have wonderful imaginations. Here we go. So number 3, Barry, would you like to read for us?
He fostered Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the girl was fair and beautiful, and with the death of her father and her mother, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. He fostered Hadassah just as, I'm sorry. Can somebody else take over? I'm sorry.
Sure. Mike, do you want to read this?
He fostered Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the girl was fair and beautiful. And with the death of her father and her mother, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. Esther 2:7. He fostered Hadassah just as myrtle, Hadassah, has a sweet fragrance and a bitter taste. So was Esther sweet to Mordecai and bitter to Haman. Esther
Okay.
1:5.
All right, so what we have here, we've got the primary text, the primary text we've got from the actual book of Esther, from Esther 2:7. We've got this particular phrase. So she was fair and beautiful, and her name was Hadassah. And she's also called Esther. So there's a whole long discussion about why she's called Hadassah, why she's called Esther, why two names. So here's one little snippet, right? So he fostered Hadassah. Here's from Esther Rabbah, from one of the rabbinic sources. And most of these sources, by the way, come to us from Esther Rabbah or from Megillah, from the Babylonian Talmud. There's one little piece from Yoma that's going to be separate. But we have at the top of most of these sources the piece that comes directly from the Megillah, and then we've got the rabbinic discussion of that. So here we've got a sense that, well, Hadassah, myrtle. We know that from the lulav, that the lulav and etrog, there's a teaching that each of these elements of the three parts of the lulav and the etrog together, one of them has taste and no smell. One of them has smell and no taste. One of them has both taste and smell. One of them has neither. And there's a whole particular piece with looking at parallels, that there's a parallel to learning and good deeds. Some people have learning, some have good deeds, some have both, some have neither, but we all need each other. We need to be gathered together. There are other interpretations of all of that, but myrtle is one of the elements of the lulav. So here we have the explanation. Myrtle has a sweet fragrance, but a bitter taste. Okay, so here we've got Esther was sweet to Mordecai, she was bitter to Haman. Whose perspective are we looking through, and whose perspective is missing? Do we have any idea how Esther felt about any of this? No?
No.
Okay. All right. Let's go on with our next text.
Judy, my understanding, though, is this right, that she and Mordecai were cousins?
We don't know for sure.
Okay.
Right? So there is a text that says that she may have been his niece, his cousin. There is one text, if we have the time, I don't know if we're going to have the time to get all the way to the end of the pieces, the little bits of pieces that I've brought to you, but there's one text that says she was actually his wife, which means then that when she gets married to Achashverosh, it adds a whole extra layer of complication, right? So, and again, did she have any say in that? We don't know.
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of. Okay. All right, so let's go on. Rebecca, did you read yet? One of the Midrashim? Forgive me. Yeah.
I'm happy to, if you want me to read something, I can't remember.
Okay. Actually, let me circle back. So Sue, would you like to read number 4?
Sure. Rabbi Yehuda says, Hadassah was her real name. Why then was she called Esther? Because she concealed the truth about herself, as it is stated. Esther had not yet made known her kindred nor her people.
Okay. So
Rabbi,
let's pause for just a moment here. Okay. So we've got, what is the teaching? Does anybody know what the usual reference is here to the Masteret, Hester Mastir? There's a play on words with the Megillah that Esther's name must have come from the word Nistar. Anybody know what this means? Nistar means hidden. Okay. So usually it's read as who is hidden in the text, that it's God that's hidden in the text, because God is not mentioned any place in the whole book of Esther, in the whole scroll of Esther. Here, it's not actually God who's thought of as Hester Nistar, as hidden. It's Esther, who's not yet made known her kindred or her people. Okay, so will you go on with the next? Let's get the rest of this text up on the screen. Okay, so.
Rabbi Nehemiah concurs and says Hadassah was her real name. Why then was she called Esther? This was her non-Hebrew name, for owing to her beauty, the nations of the world called her after Istahar, Venus. Ben Azai says, Esther was neither tall nor short, but of average size like a myrtle tree, and therefore she was called Hadassah, the Hebrew name resembling that myrtle tree. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korha said, Esther was called Hadassah because she was greenish, having a pale complexion like a myrtle, but a cord of divine grace was strung around her, endowing her with a beautiful appearance.
Okay, so let's take it apart and just make sure we understand this. There is a teaching that says that this story could never actually have happened historically because there were only a small number of families in that area of the world that the king could marry among. He could have taken any number of virgins as members of his harem, but he couldn't actually have made anybody queen except somebody from one of these few noble families. So there are little bits here and there, little hints that point us to the fact that this is probably not an historic text. But another piece of this is the names in the story. Esther sounds way too much like Ishtar, which is one of the chief goddesses in that area of the world. Mordechai's name sound like, anybody know this? Sounds like Marduk. So Marduk was the chief male god in that area. Again, these names these are among the hints for us that these are probably not historic. This is probably not a historic text. It's what we do with it as a text about a near demise for our people and our people having been saved at the last minute. That it's important for us to look at what we do with the text. So we have this interesting fact of Esther's called Esther. Why? She's called after Venus, and as I said, she wasn't tall or short. She was average size like a myrtle. Okay, and then Rabbi Yehuda ben Korcha says, oh, maybe she had a greenish complexion, and so she looked like a myrtle. We're going for imaginative, creative rendition reading of the text here. Not quite sure how anybody could really look at a young woman and say she has a greenish complexion, but she's thought of among the rabbis as having this cord of divine grace strung around her, a chut shel chesed. The only thing that I can think of that might connect the word chesed to the book of Esther is that Hadass and chesed, if you take the chet and make it into a hey and you rearrange your letters, you can end up with a sort of a round Brown's barn way of connecting the two words. Etymologically, they're not connected, but there may be some way of connecting chesed to Hadassah. But the very thought there is that she's got this chut shel chesed, that she's got a cord of divine grace around her. So again, we're talking about a young woman who is seen as beautiful. Whose eyes are we looking through here?
Well, Akashveros could be one.
Yes. And who's telling this story? This particular rabbinic text is told by these rabbis. Of what gender? I don't have to spell this out, right?
They're all men.
They're all men. They're all men, right? We're looking clearly through male eyes here. They're seeing this young woman, they're casting her as beautiful. Oh, she must have been so beautiful. And she's a young woman, she's idealized. Okay. And the cord of grace around her. Maybe she had a greenish complexion, but okay, but you're still thinking of her as beautiful. Okay. So then we've got number 5. So Claudia, would you like to read number 5 for us?
Sure. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus. Esther was hidden in Shushan, the capital, for 4 years. Unlike the other women who wanted to be chosen, Esther tried to evade the king, but she was the one picked to be queen.
Okay, so what did she try to do? Was she really intent on becoming queen? According to this, she wasn't. Do we know how Esther felt? Here we've got the rabbis lauding her for, oh, she must have resisted. She must have gone off and hidden. No, oh, we don't know what Esther actually felt. This is what they're assuming.
I have to
Okay.
say, this just makes me think of Hillary Clinton's campaign, like how the worst thing would be that she would actually want
Yes.
to be the queen, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. To have
like that's the
ambition.
most offensive thing,
That's
that
right.
she would want something.
That's right. To have that sense of ambition. God forbid.
Yeah.
It's okay for a man to have it, but it's not okay for a woman. Right.
Like that's.
Good for you.
Well,
Good for you.
it's slightly different. The queen had no power. I mean, it's not.
Yeah,
It's,
but
Hillary-
still to be chosen and to, be able to parade as on the hand of the king. You're
Well,
right.
I guess what I meant is we don't have to get into a long Megillah about it. But there's a slight difference between being chosen to be the object of control and subservience
Yeah.
than to be an independent woman running for president of the United States.
Yes, you're right. Lahavdil. Okay, there
Yeah,
is a
I mean-
difference. Yes, thank you. Thank you. All right.
Sorry to push the point.
No, it comes right down to the fact of being objectified, right?
It does, but I would argue it's not, I mean, I don't know that much about Persian society, but even though the queen was objectified, she might have had more power than almost anyone. I mean, she wasn't in charge, but she had access to power in a way that hardly anyone else did.
Right, and again,
That's
this
what
is
Esther's able to do. She leverages that position to do something that who else could talk back to the king, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I don't see it the same way, but we should go on.
Right.
So-
So, and the reality is that we don't know enough about that
Yeah.
area and that era, but it does look like she somehow managed to maneuver something, but it was against the odds. Was she as disempowered as all the other women? We don't know. What we do know is how the rabbis in these particular texts are looking at her.
Yes.
Are looking at her, looking at all women. So let's go on with number 6. This is wonderful and very rich. So please keep the comments coming. So we're Reb Tiferet, would you like to read us number 6?
I think she's driving, she
Okay.
said. so
Okay.
Probably not
Good
safe.
for her. Good for her that she's heading home. Good. All right. So who are we up to? Diane, will you read for
Number
us?
6.
Yeah.
The verse states, and the 7 maids chosen to be given her out of the king's house. Rabbi said she would have a separate maid attend her each day, and she would count the days of the week by them. So she was always aware when Shabbat was.
Okay, so we've got the text itself from the book of Esther, and there were 7 maids who were given her, right? And then we've got the commentary on them. Oh, must have been, right? What are the rabbis here concerned with? That she's going to know how to stay observant as a Jew and observant according to their standards, right? Meaning she must know when Shabbat is, so she won't chance breaking it. Right, so she would have a different one serving her each day, so she would know when Shabbat would come. Right, so this is all their perspective on her. What was important to her according to them, according to what was important to them. Okay, so number 7, Rebecca, will you read?
The doozy. On each day, Mordecai would walk before the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what would be done with her. It's a quote from the Megillah. On each day, Mordecai would walk before the courtyard of the harem to give her the opportunity to ask about her bloodstains and her menstrual status.
Okay.
The rabbis understood Mordecai's escorting of Esther as his providing her with halakhic guidance, for he would rule for her in questions of nidah, the laws governing menstrual purity, and more generally family purity, to find out how Esther was, that they should not cast any spells of sorcery on her.
All right, so this is one of those moments where there's an opportunity here to get to find out how Esther's feeling. But no, do the rabbis seize that opportunity? No, this is all about whether she would be ritually pure enough to potentially engage in sexual relations.
Judy, by this time, they already had the rules of nidah?
Not in the book of Esther.
Yeah.
Centuries later when the rabbis are looking at this text.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So we've got text inside text, text inside text. Right. So from centuries later, we've got the rabbinic era. So the Megillah is late biblical, and we don't exactly when. There are those who dated, I think, to right after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, so Babylonian exile. But there are also those who date it much later, from what I understand. And then the rabbinic texts come to us from, 100, 300, 500, 800 years later. So there are those who actually date Esther Rabbah as late as, I think, the 10th or the 11th century of the Common Era. So that's very late rabbinic. All right, so we've clearly got, this is clearly through a male lens. This is about whether she's available to the man, to her husband, as which is also fascinating, I think, that they're worried about whether she'd be keeping Nida to be able to sleep with her non-Jewish husband, right, the king. The reasoning here is a little bit complex, but okay, so Barry, will you read for us?
Number 8.
Yes, please.
The verse states, in the evening she went, and in the morning she returned. Rabbi Yohanan said, from the implicit criticism of that wicked man, Ahasuerus, who cohabitated with many women, we have incidentally learned his praise as well, that he would not engage in sexual relations during the day, but in a more modest fashion at night.
So they're grudgingly going to give him some credit. They're assuming that what this text from the book of Esther means, in the evening she went, in the morning she returned, that he was only having sex at night. And they were saying very moralistically, that's the right way to do it. So grudgingly, they're going to give him credit. Anyway, in the middle of all of this. Okay, and number 9, Mike.
The verse states, and Esther obtained favor in the sight of all those who looked upon her. Rabbi Elazar said, this teaches that she appeared to each and every one as if she were a member of his own nation, and therefore she obtained favor in the eyes of all.
Okay, so again, whose eyes are we looking through here? Are we looking through Esther's eyes? No, okay, so they're clearly male eyes. A lot of objectification going on. So, Sue, would you like to read for us number 10? And we're getting into now some more explicit material. By the way, I have I will tell you, I've sort of cherry picked some of these to illustrate this particular point that you now know very well, but about, which perspective are we looking through and which voice is missing. It was not hard to cherry pick. Most of the material was more like this. One midrash I came across actually talked about what Esther might have been feeling. So anyway, so number 10, Mike.
Do you want me to? The verse states,
yes, please. Thank you.
The verse states, and the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she obtained grace, favor in his sight more than all the virgins. Rav said, this double language indicates that if he wanted to taste in her the taste of a virgin during intercourse, he tasted it. And if he wanted to experience the taste of a non-virgin, he tasted it. And therefore, he loved her more than all the other women.
Okay, so forgive the explicit nature of these texts, and what's the double language? We were all adults here. So what's the double language that they're talking about in the Esther text? If you look at the top of this. Anybody want to hazard a guess? Okay, so I'll give it to you.
There's a reference to all the women and then a reference to all the virgins, that Esther saw the women in one way and the king didn't care whether or not they were virgins. I don't know.
It's a good guess. It's a very good guess. I think actually what they're pointing to is the words grace and favor, which
totally missed that.
Yeah, they could be seen as synonyms, and the rabbis get off on, they're very excited about the fact that whenever you see two words that seem to mean the same thing, the Bible would not include both of them unless each of them referred to something different, right? They're hints for us. So we've got grace and favor, and we've got, he must have been able to see her both as virgin and as non-virgin. Okay, this gets even, forgive me, but it gets even worse. So number 11, who are we up to? Claudia, would you like to read for us?
Sure. The Midrash compares Esther to a hind and to the hind and
What
to
is
the
a
dawn.
hind? Let's pause for just a minute. A hind
Yeah.
here is a,
Rabbit, right?
no, it's a deer, is a
Oh, it's a
deer.
deer.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And to the dawn, based on
Psalm,
Psalm 22:1, for the leader on Ayelet HaShachar, literally the hind of the dawn, which the rabbis apply to Esther. In Tractate Megillah, the Gemara states that as Queen Esther prophetically recited Psalm 22 in reference to her situation as she was about to come before King Achashverosh without being summoned. Rabbi Zeira said, "Why is Esther likened to a hind? It is to tell you, just as in the case of a hind, its womb is narrow and it is desirable to its mate at each and every hour, like it is at the first hour, so too Esther was desirable to Achashverosh at each and every hour, like she was at the first hour." Rabbi Asi said, "Why was Esther likened to the dawn? It is to tell you, just as the dawn is the conclusion of the entire night, so too Esther was the conclusion of all miracles performed for the entire Jewish people." She was compared to the dawn, for just as the dawn breaks at the end of each night, so too Esther, that is, the miraculous delivery of the Jews, came after there had been no miracles during the period of exile and darkness.
period of
Okay, and I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna have to go. I'm doing a favor for a neighbor, but thank you so much, Judy. Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Wonderful to study together. Thank you for being here, Claudia.
Great to be with you, Claudia.
Yes, good to see you.
So Ayelet here comes from, they're reading it as Ayal, like compared to an Ayal, which would be a male deer. And Ayelet then would be the feminine. And Ayelet HaShachar usually is a term that's referred to the morning star, the dawn star. But again, the rabbis go off in this, fantastical kind of conjecture of why it is that Esther may have actually been reading that psalm, that particular psalm. So
It's clear that they've been in the yeshiva for too long, just around other guys. I mean, this is pretty bad.
And these are guys also who think of the Torah and study as something they are drawn to and as if married to almost, and they actually have to be sent home to their wives. Many of these men were, they were married and they were family men, but they needed to be drawn away from the text in order to go home to their wives, because this was what was very alluring to them. All right, so here we've got another text that has to do with, the women being seen in a particular way, seen beautiful and all. And I'm gonna suggest that we not even go into this particular one. Again, it gets even more explicit, but the big question, the big underlined point here is, whose perspective are we looking through and whose perspective is missing?
All through the male rabbis, through the male perspective, and Esther's perspective and Vashti's perspective is completely absent.
Absolutely, completely absent. So there is a wonderful opportunity. We could respond to that in lots of different ways. We could be angry at it. We could be outraged. We could also say, there's a half of something and we're missing the other half. Just as they were imaginative, we could ourselves go into an imaginative engagement here with the material and come up with our own midrashim. And those could come from men and women. They don't have to only come from women, but we might then look at how Vashti may have seen what was going on for her, how Esther may have seen what was going on, what made sense, what didn't make sense, what were the wishes, what were the hopes, what were their fears, what was going on for them, and to write these up into another body of material that could be taught alongside this. We've got this wonderful song, "She Said No to the King," that gets included in our Purim celebrations. But even that, I think, is looking at Vashti from outside of her, right? How wonderful it is that, they're turning it on its head. It's not that it's terrible that she said no to the king. It's wonderful that she said no to the king. Again, we're still looking at her from outside of her. We don't know what she was thinking and what she was feeling. I would love to see another song, another story, another midrash. Midrashim are written to sort of fill in the blanks, fill in the little interstices, the little places where there might be a Wait, do we know what happened here? Do we know what happened there? Those places in the text where we might not know, we can fill those in with our own imaginations, just as these rabbis did. And there are proof texts, by the way, for just about anything. So I will encourage you actually to think about some of the places that you would have questions about. What was it that was going on? Maybe just behind the scenes in the text, in the minds and the hearts of the women in the scenes. So
I
anybody
was
have any
just
comments?
reading, well, I was just looking at this book that I took out of the library called Praise Her Works, edited by Penina Edelman, who I haven't met yet, but is part of our community. And it's about 23 biblical women. And I haven't read it, but looking forward to reading it. Two of the women are Vashti and Esther, and there's something in their voices, kind of what they have to say. So,
Yeah.
And actually, Judith Cates wrote about, I think Michal. So
Great.
it'll be interesting, especially having studied this with you, then to look at what they have to say. But that's the whole point of this book, I think.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, we often lose our own perspective. I think I don't know if it's just women. But oftentimes we're looking through somebody else's eyes, and we may lose the sense that I have a right to actually look through my own eyes, and I can know what my own truth is. And my own truth as a woman may be different from some other woman's truth, right? But I mean, because we're each individuals, but wouldn't it be great to have some other voices to be added to the canon here, to what gets taught as these kinds of texts would be taught, perhaps as a corrective or just a balance, So Diane, you want to say something?
Yeah, just a question to you or to anyone else. Traditionally, the story is often told, well, Vashti speaks up for herself and then she gets kicked out. But she does have her voice that she refuses to go along. In the story of Esther, my memory of the story was that she did this thing for Mordecai in order to save I don't know where the idea of saving the Jewish people came in, but at the point that she spoke up for, said, I'm really Jewish, which he didn't know. And he sort of portrayed, they say here that he was wicked. He sort of is portrayed in my memory as kind of a schlemiel.
Yeah.
A sexist schlemiel, but a schlemiel nonetheless.
The Megillah itself, Megillah Esther, does portray him as a guy who liked to party, simple-minded.
Right, okay.
The rabbis have a field day with portraying him and Vashti also, by the way, as evil. And one of the things with Vashti is, oftentimes people will say, why did this happen to me? Right? Try to make sense out of it. I mean, as a chaplain, a professional chaplain, that's one of the things that I listen for. How is somebody trying to make sense out of what's going on for them, or does it not make any sense at all? And can I be sort of sacred witness to that awful reality? But the fact is that the rabbis, they go off on a tangent that says, oh, she deserved what it was that happened to her because she must have had some Jewish slaves, female slaves, that she abused. She was cruel to them and she made them dance naked. And therefore what she had made other people do and suffer, she then had to suffer in the same way. Right. So it's just it's a different way of looking at the text. I mean, I was a little disappointed when I came across that particular midrash, but it's there. Right. And, do we want to hold on to it? Do we not? I mean, I'd like to still think of Vashti as having stood up for her rights as a woman, right, and having stood up for her sense as a self-respect and all, and for that she was schmeiced. She was banished, right? So
Judy, could you stop screen sharing so we can all see each other a little more easily?
Sure. Thank you. Sorry for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I should have done that a while ago. Forgive me that I didn't. Yeah. Thank you. So so wonderful to get to study together. This has been lovely. Lovely.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for all the work you put into this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. This is so great.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful.
So
I'm just
really-
happy to get to do some study together. So this
Yeah.
is just a delight.
Thank you.
So I'm going to wish, I want to watch our time and honor our commitment to be off by 8:30. It's just 8:31, sorry. Again, thank you. And I'm going to wish each and every one of you a Chag Purim Sameach, a very happy
Chag
Purim.
Sameach.
Thank you.
Hugs and
You.
Go ahead. Okay,
Thanks.
all the best.
Bye-bye.
Take
Right.
care.
Totally appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Chag Sameach. Thank you for adding
Safe
your
travels,
voice.
Rav Tiferet.
Yes, safe home. Yeah. Take care. Bye.